Welcome back to the Global Intelligence Weekly Wrap-Up for the week ending October 18th, 2024. This is your trusted source for expert analysis and insights on today's most critical intelligence and national security developments from around the world. This week, we are tackling some of the biggest stories shaping global security: the growing diplomatic crisis between Canada and India, US sanctions on a pro-Palestinian group with alleged terror ties, and a high-profile assassination of a Hamas leader in the Middle East. And so much more. Your host Neil Bisson has more than 25 years of intelligence and law enforcement experience. By listening to the Global Intelligence Weekly Wrap-Up, you're getting insights you won't find anywhere else. If you enjoy today's episode, don't forget to subscribe on Spotify, YouTube, or Apple Podcasts, and ask your smart speaker to play Global Intelligence Weekly Wrap-Up. Now let's get started with this week's intelligence and national security most vital stories.
Welcome back, everyone, to this week's episode of the Global Intelligence Weekly Wrap-Up. It's been another busy week, from the expulsion of Indian diplomats in Canada to the Prime Minister's testimony at the inquiry into foreign interference to the killing of the leader of Hamas. There's plenty to recap, analyze, and discuss, so let's start. In our first story, we're diving into a high-stakes diplomatic standoff between Canada and India. Earlier this week, the RCMP released stunning allegations claiming that Indian diplomats based in Canada have been linked to serious criminal activities, including homicides and extortion. The Canadian government has expelled 6 Indian diplomats, and in retaliation, India has expelled 6 Canadian diplomats. I'll break down the escalating confrontation and what it means for national security in Canada and beyond. The RCMP's allegations are particularly alarming, as they involve India's diplomats leveraging their official positions to engage in clandestine activities, such as gathering intelligence and targeting members of Canada's South Asian community. The murder of a prominent Sikh activist in British Columbia last year appears to have triggered this public diplomatic fallout, but the implications go much deeper. From an intelligence standpoint, this is a critical case of foreign interference on Canadian soil. The allegations suggest that Indian officials may have orchestrated or facilitated criminal activities, including homicides, through coerced individuals or proxies. If true, this raises major concerns about the protection of Canada's sovereignty and the safety of Canadian citizens, especially those with ties to India's Sikh community. The diplomatic confrontation began last year when Prime Minister Trudeau announced that Canadian authorities were investigating credible allegations linking the Indian government to the murder of Sikh activist Hardeep Singh Nijjar. The tensions have been simmering ever since, with India accusing Canada of harboring pro-Palestinian extremists, individuals advocating for an independent Sikh state in the Punjab region. This isn't the first time Canada has faced allegations of foreign interference, but it marks a particularly brazen example, as it involves not only espionage, but the potential involvement of organized crime and murder. Similar patterns of foreign interference have been noted in countries dealing with rival nations seeking to disrupt internal affairs, but this case highlights the complexities of diplomatic immunity and international law. RCMP Commissioner Mike Doon made it clear in a press conference that evidence points to Indian diplomats using their positions to influence criminal activities in Canada. He cited that individuals and businesses were coerced into providing intelligence to Indian officials, which was then used to target specific community members. As an intelligence professional, I find this concerning on several levels. First, it indicates a level of sophistication in India's foreign interference operations that transcends traditional espionage. It involves criminal elements being used to achieve strategic objectives. Second, the failure to gain India's cooperation in this investigation suggests deeper diplomatic issues that will likely escalate. It's important for countries like Canada to not only counter these activities, but also hold those responsible accountable, as these actions compromise Canada's national security and endanger our citizens. The RCMP allegations against Indian diplomats in Canada represents a significant escalation in the already tense relationship between the two countries. These accusations, if proven, point to a broader issue of state-sponsored criminal activities on foreign soil, challenging not only Canada's sovereignty, but also international norms. As we move forward, we should watch closely for how this confrontation plays out. What other nations would take similar action in response to the alleged Indian interference? How will Canada and India navigate this diplomatic crisis moving forward? Sticking with the fallout of the accusations against the Indian government, our next story focuses on the escalating diplomatic conflict between Canada and India. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau publicly accused the Indian government of orchestrating an assassination campaign against Sikh nationalists on Canadian soil. This bold move shines a light on India's intelligence agencies and their potential operations beyond South Asia, sparking concern across the globe about the intelligence community. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's shocking accusation that India's intelligence services were involved in the killing of a Sikh nationalist in Canada has brought the covert operation of India's intelligence agencies into the global spotlight. Diplomatic tensions between Canada and India have been building for years, but this public declaration marked a turning point, drawing attention to the extent of Indian covert activity far beyond its traditional sphere of influence in South Asia. India's intelligence operations typically focused on regional concerns like Pakistan and insurgencies within India's borders, but are now being viewed under a new lens. According to Canadian authorities, 6 Indian diplomats may have been involved in networks engaged in harassment, intimidation, extortion, and even homicide. This case has raised questions about how Indian intelligence agencies operate abroad and possibly involvement of India's National Security Advisor, Ajit Doval, who is widely regarded as the architect of India's covert foreign operations. Doval, a former intelligence officer himself, has been instrumental in shaping India's current intelligence strategy, which has been increasingly assertive in countering perceived threats from diaspora groups like Sikh separatists. India's covert intelligence operations have long been active in South Asia, particularly against its adversaries, such as Pakistan, where it has been accused of carrying out targeted assassinations and airstrikes. However, Trudeau's statements have expanded the view of Indian intelligence activities to Western soil, which could have far-reaching implications for diplomatic relations between India and other Western nations. Indian agencies such as the Research and Analysis Ring, or RAW, have been linked to a range of covert operations, but these activities have generally flown under the radar outside of South Asia. Canada's public confrontation has pulled India's intelligence tactics into the global spotlight, forcing countries to reconsider how they view India's geopolitical strategy and its intelligence apparatus. The alleged involvement of 6 Indian diplomats in this case brings to mind the use of diplomatic cover by intelligence operatives, a tactic employed by various intelligence agencies around the world. This incident reveals the lengths to which state intelligence networks might go to target dissidents abroad. This escalation is unprecedented. It's rare for a Western leader to openly accuse another country's intelligence service of orchestrating an assassination on their soil. Traditionally, such allegations are dealt with behind closed doors to avoid full-blown diplomatic crises. However, Trudeau's bold approach signifies a new phase in Canada-India relations, likely signaling a hardening stance by Canada against foreign interference on its soil. Experts have pointed out that this move could also strain India's relations with other Western allies, especially those with large diaspora populations who may be concerned about being targeted by foreign intelligence agencies. In the short term, this will likely lead to increased scrutiny of Indian diplomatic missions and their personnel in Canada and beyond. As we continue to watch how the diplomatic standoff unfolds, it's clear that Trudeau's public accusations have opened a new chapter in the history of international intelligence operations. The reach and tactics of the Indian intelligence agencies, once confined to the shadows, are now being exposed on the world stage. How this plays out in the coming weeks and months will have a significant impact on the Canada-India relations and may reshape global intelligence operations. Canada isn't the only country dealing with deadly actions of Indian intelligence. In our next story, we're covering a shocking and highly concerning development between India and the United States: the arrest of a former Indian government official, Vikram Yadav, accused of orchestrating a plot to assassinate a prominent American citizen, Sikh separatist leader, Thwart Singh Panoon, on U.S. soil. This recent revelation has intensified discussions around the threats posed by foreign interference, not just in Canada, but now in the United States. According to the U.S. Department of Justice, Yadav is charged with orchestrating a plot to kill Panoon, an outspoken supporter of the Khalistan movement, which advocates for an independent Sikh state in India. What makes the story particularly striking is that Yadav's plot was uncovered when he tried to hire an assassin who turned out to be an undercover law enforcement agent, exposing a chilling attempt at extrajudicial measures by foreign actors on American soil. The arrest of Nikhil Gupta, Yadav's alleged recruiter in Prague, and his extradition to the United States for trial demonstrates the seriousness of these charges. This case shows a broader pattern of external states attempting to target dissidents or perceived enemies beyond their borders, raising questions about the scope of foreign espionage in North America. This case is part of a growing trend of state-sponsored actions targeting individuals abroad. We've discussed the similar allegations against India and Canada involving the assassination of Hardeep Singh Nijjar, another Sikh leader. The timing of Yadav's arrest aligns with diplomatic tensions between India and Canada, with India expelling Canadian diplomats amid accusations of interference. However, U.S. officials have been quick to clarify that the cases are being handled independently, with no direct coordination between the U.S., Canada, and India on these matters. Such actions, if proven true, underline how far foreign states are willing to go in pursuing their internal objectives, even on foreign soil. It also places a new spotlight on India's Research and Analysis Wing, India's premier intelligence agency, and raises questions about whether elements within RAW were involved in these plots. U.S. officials, including those from the Department of Justice, have stated their concerns over the case and have highlighted the cooperation between Indian and American intelligence services. They emphasize that India has been actively engaged in addressing these allegations, stressing that Vikram Yadav is no longer employed by the Indian government. However, from an intelligence perspective, this case could have long-term implications on how the U.S. views its counterintelligence operations with India. As we know, foreign interference doesn't always come in the form of cyber attacks or espionage. It sometimes takes the shape of real-world targeted violence. The arrest of Vikram Yadav marks a significant escalation in the risk posed by state-sponsored actions abroad. It challenges perceptions of India as purely strategic ally and brings into question broader questions about diplomatic fallout. Moving forward, we could see closer scrutiny of foreign nationals operating on U.S. soil, especially in the intelligence and diplomatic circles. As these investigations continue, we'll keep a close watch on emerging details that may shape international relationships and national security policies between the U.S., India, and Canada. In line with the theme of Canada and the U.S. sharing intelligence concerns, our next story deals with a critical news article from Al Jazeera titled, U.S. and Canada Impose Sanctions, Blacklist Pro-Palestinian Group Samidoun. We'll be diving into the recent sanctions imposed by the U.S. and Canada against the Palestinian prisoner support network Samidoun, a group accused of raising funds for a designated terrorist organization. The top story coming out of Al Jazeera this week revolves around Samidoun, which has been labeled by both the U.S. and Canada as a front for the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, or the PFLP, a group classified as a terrorist organization by multiple nations, including the U.S., Canada, and the EU. According to the U.S. Treasury Department, Samidoun has been masquerading as a charity while funneling funds to the PFLP. This designation comes amidst growing international pressure, largely due to escalating conflict in Gaza and widespread pro-Palestinian protests in Western nations. The importance of cracking down on groups like Samidoun cannot be overstated. The ability of terrorist organizations to fund their operations through international networks poses a significant threat to global security. By targeting Samidoun's financial infrastructure, both Canada and the United States are taking critical steps to limit the operational capabilities of the PFLP, effectively curbing their ability to mobilize resources for terrorism. Samidoun, described as a Palestinian prisoner solidarity network, claims to focus on the rights and freedoms of Palestinian prisoners. However, as seen in similar cases, terrorist organizations often use charitable fronts to raise funds. This tactic is not new. Al-Qaeda, Hezbollah, and Hamas have all been known to exploit humanitarian platforms for financial gains. The timing of these sanctions is particularly relevant, given the ongoing Israel-Gaza conflict. The situation has brought renewed attention to groups like Samidoun, which has seen increased scrutiny as public support for the Palestinian cause rises across North America and Europe. In fact, Samidoun was banned in Germany last year for disseminating anti-Israeli propaganda and glorifying Hamas. These trends of heightened attention and crackdowns on pro-Palestinian organizations show the wider implications of the current Middle East conflict on global security. Bradley Smith, an official from the U.S. Treasury Department, referred to Samidoun as a sham charity, accusing it of diverting much-needed humanitarian aid to terrorist groups. In Canada, Minister of Public Safety Dominic LeBlanc echoed similar sentiments, stating that designating Samidoun as a terrorist entity sends a strong message about Canada's zero tolerance for violent extremism. From an intelligence perspective, these sanctions represent more than just financial curbs. They signify a broader geopolitical stance. Canada and the U.S. have unified actions and underscore a strong Western alignment in countering groups that not only fund terrorism but also potentially influence foreign interference in Western democracies through pro-Palestinian activism. The designation of Samidoun as a terrorist entity by both the United States and Canada is part of a wider effort to cut off financial lifeline to global terrorist organizations. These sanctions are a clear signal that neither country will tolerate any group that financially supports terrorism, regardless of the political cause they claim to represent. As tensions continue to escalate in Gaza, we can expect further scrutiny of international organizations with links to designated terrorist groups. The next story focuses on the killing of Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar during an Israeli operation in Gaza. Sinwar, one of Israel's most wanted men, was seen to have been responsible for the deadly October 7, 2023 attack on southern Israel, which marked a turning point in the ongoing conflict. According to Israeli officials, Yahya Sinwar, Hamas's top leader in Gaza, was killed in a firefight in Rafah during an Israeli military operation. While Hamas has not yet responded to the claim, Israeli Foreign Minister Israel Katz announced Sinwar's death to international counterparts, stating that the elimination could pave the way for a shift in Gaza's future, potentially reducing Hamas's control and the influence of Iran in the region. The death of Sinwar marks a critical blow to Hamas. Sinwar had been a pivotal figure in Hamas since assuming leadership following Ismail Hanani's assassination. A mastermind behind Hamas's operations, particularly the recent attack on Israel, Sinwar's removal is seen by Israel as a major victory. However, the situation remains fluid. Israel is conducting DNA tests in the body of the slain Palestinian to confirm Sinwar's identity. There's also conflicting information, as Israeli intelligence previously suggested that Sinwar had been hiding deep within Gaza's tunnel system, possibly among Israeli hostages. The Israeli military's statement about eliminating 3 terrorists in the building where Sinwar was reportedly found has not confirmed the presence of hostages. Yahya Sinwar, age 62, hailed from Khan Yunis, a refugee camp in southern Gaza. He played a founding role in Hamas's internal security apparatus and spent over 2 decades in Israeli prisons. Known for his hardline stance, Sinwar's influence shaped much of Hamas's strategy and operations, including its intricate underground tunnel network used in combat. Israel has previously claimed the elimination of key Hamas figures including Mohammed Diaf, the head of Hamas's military wing, and Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah, but those claims were contested by Hamas. Sinwar's confirmed death is going to be symbolic of operational loss to the group, but its long-term impact on the ground remains uncertain. The killing of Sinwar will have immediate repercussions for both sides of the conflict. Israeli officials argue that Sinwar's removal might lead to the release of hostages and signal a strategic turning point in the war in Gaza. However, some analysts caution that it could escalate retaliatory attacks, fueling further violence in the region. Experts also point to the broader implications of Sinwar's death on the dynamics between Hamas and Iran. Iran has been a key backer of Hamas, and Israeli officials see this as an opportunity to reduce Tehran's influence in Gaza. Whether this leads to a shift in Gaza's political landscape or simply hardens Hamas's resolve remains to be seen. The killing of Yahya Sinwar marks a potentially significant moment in Israel's military operations in Gaza. While confirmation is still pending, Sinwar's death could have far-reaching consequences for the region's future. We'll continue to monitor the developments, especially regarding the verification of his death and the potential impact on hostages and the broader Israeli-Palestinian conflict. We switch our attention from the Middle East to the United Kingdom and examine the case of Daniel Khalife, a former British Army soldier. Khalife, who was accused of espionage for Iran and recently faced trial at Woolwich Crown Court in the UK. The court heard startling revelations, including Khalife's alleged offer to undergo espionage training in Iran. Daniel Khalife, just 23 years old, is facing charges for allegedly gathering information for Iran, including compiling a list of Special Forces soldiers and orchestrating a bomb threat. Perhaps one of the most concerning aspects is a recorded conversation from November 2021 between Khalife and 2 alleged Iranian contacts. In this recording, Khalife appears to discuss his desire to travel to Iran for training, though the Iranian handlers suggest Lebanon as a safer alternative. While there is no evidence that Khalife ever traveled to either country, this conversation raises serious questions about his intent and level of engagement with foreign intelligence services. The fact that this recording was found on Khalife's personal iPad indicates a severe lapse in operational security, or OPSEC, on his part, highlighting the risks of electronic surveillance in modern espionage cases. Additionally, the prosecution detailed how Khalife had been collecting money in covert drop-offs, receiving large sums of cash in public locations across London, presumably for his activities. Khalife's case fits into a larger pattern of espionage activities that target dissident or military personnel in the West. As a former member of the Royal Corps of Signals, Khalife would have had access to highly sensitive information, including communication systems and military capabilities, making him a potentially valuable asset for the Iranian intelligence regime. This trial also calls attention to the methods used by foreign intelligence services such as Iran's to cultivate assets within Western militaries and government organizations. The Iranian regime has long been known to utilize proxy networks in places like Lebanon, adding credibility to Khalife's contacts, suggesting Lebanon as a safer training ground. What makes his case even more concerning is the broader context of state-sponsored espionage that has dominated recent headlines. With Khalife's case emerging around the same time as other high-profile intelligence breaches in Western nations, the use of local recruits by foreign powers continues to be a significant national security challenge for governments around the world. While Khalife has denied all charges, his phone conversations with MI5 handlers, where he admitted to fabricating documents for Iranian contacts, adds complexity to his defense. His communications reveal a deeper connection with his handlers, particularly when discussing his payment method in covert cash pickups. From an intelligence perspective, this case highlights how state actors like Iran are willing to exploit vulnerable individuals, including military personnel, to gain access to classified information. The Iranian intelligence services has a long history of targeting former soldiers or dissidents abroad, and this case may suggest a growing trend in their operational reach. As the trial continues, it's clear that Daniel Khalife's case is a dramatic reminder of the persistent threat posed by foreign espionage networks. With espionage attempts on the rise globally, governments must remain vigilant, especially as foreign states seek to infiltrate national defense organizations. I'll be following this trial closely as more details emerge and its implications for national security become clear. For our last story, I'll be discussing more news out of the UK involving a possible Russian plot. The article is titled, "Russia Suspected of Planting Device on Plane That Caused UK Warehouse Fire." The incident occurred in July at a DHL warehouse in Birmingham, where an incendiary device ignited, and counterterrorism police suspect Russian spies may have been behind it. This incident has triggered a major investigation across Europe, especially with similar events happening around the same time in Germany. The incendiary device is believed to have arrived in Birmingham warehouse by air, though details about the aircraft or its destination remain unclear. Had the device ignited mid-flight, the consequences could have been catastrophic. Authorities suspect this incident is part of a larger campaign by Russian intelligence, which has been condemned by European leaders for its recklessness. From an intelligence standpoint, this is a clear example of Russian sabotage operation targeting Western infrastructure. While not all of these operations succeed, their intent to spread chaos and fear is evident. Intelligence agencies across Europe are on high alert, working to coordinate their efforts in response to this growing threat. What's significant here is how this highlights Russia's ongoing effort to disrupt and undermine nations that are supporting Ukraine during its conflict with Russia. This isn't the first time Russia's GRU has been accused of reckless operations in Europe. Earlier this year, similar attacks were reported in Germany, including a DHL facility in Leipzig, where another incendiary device almost ignited on a plane. In Poland, a major fire destroyed a shopping center, and intelligence services suspect Russian involvement. The GRU's role in these incidences reflects their aggressiveness, which often seems poorly coordinated and amateurish. Ken McCallum, head of the MI5, recently warned that Russia has been escalating these types of sabotage operations, further straining its already contentious relationship with European nations. Historically, the GRU has engaged in a wide range of disruptive activities, from political interference to cyber attacks, and these physical sabotage plots add yet another dimension to their operations. Several intelligence chiefs have spoken out about these events. Thomas Haldenwang, the head of Germany's Domestic Intelligence Service, highlighted the potential disaster that could have occurred had the device in Leipzig ignited mid-flight. Similarly, Ken McCallum's remarks about Russia's increasing recklessness are a stark reminder of how these actions are counterproductive for the Kremlin. While they attempt to cause chaos, they're inadvertently strengthening cooperation between Western intelligence agencies. From an intelligence perspective, these actions by Russia seem to be designed to test the responses of European countries. While none of these sabotage attempts have resulted in mass casualties, they serve as a reminder of how vulnerable supply chains and critical infrastructure can be. Russian intelligence operations appear to be ramping up in both scale and recklessness across Europe, while the DHL incident in Birmingham being the latest in a series of attempted sabotage attacks. As European intelligence agencies continue to collaborate, the hope is that growing network will be able to detect and stop future plots before they can endanger lives. Looking ahead, we may see more of these kinds of disruptive operations, but the real question is how long Russia can continue to engage in such brazen acts before facing more serious diplomatic or military consequences. Well, that's going to do it for this week. As always, there are links to the stories I've discussed in the show notes. Before I go, I want to extend a heartfelt congratulations to Daniel Rogers for being appointed the new Director of the Canadian Security Intelligence Service. I had planned to discuss Mr. Rogers' appointment in this week's episode. However, with so much going on in the world of espionage and national security, I didn't have time to do it. But until next week, as always, stay curious, stay informed, and stay safe.
Thank you for joining us on this week's Global Intelligence Weekly Wrap-Up. Remember, these are dangerous times, so like Neil always reminds us, stay curious, stay informed, and stay safe. Your support is crucial to keeping the expert analysis and insights coming. Whether it's a one-time contribution or ongoing backing, visit buymeacoffee.com/GIKN or go to www.buzzsprout.com/2336717/support. Be sure to subscribe, share, and comment to help grow our intelligence network of informed and prepared listeners. And if you want even more insights and analysis on the world of intelligence, go to www.globalintelligenceknowledgenetwork.com. This website is a valuable source of intelligence for everyone from the practitioner, to the academic, to the enthusiast. Neil Bisson will be back next week with more in-depth analysis on all things foreign interference, national security, and spy-related. Be sure to tune in so you don't miss out.